a world where the number of movies available is great, but many are so bad, you'll learn a new definition of hate. One man sifts and reviews through the movie sludge. One man will be the movie cop, jury, and judge. He goes by many names, but you know him by MoviesMerica.
Hey, all you beautiful movie-loving people out there, live from a red carpet somewhere, surrounded by celebrities. This is the MoviesMerica podcast with Van Ebert, where movie reviews meet cold brews. Van will review your favorite and maybe not so favorite movies while enjoying some ice-cold beers and saying cheers. Now let's head into the theater and join our illustrious movie reviewer du jour, who's no doubt got the beer ready to pour, Van Ebert. Oh, we've got a great episode for you today. Oh, yes. Yes, we're going to get a little spooky. Get a little, get a little ghosty up in here, you know? Yeah, I tell you, get ready to talk about the supernatural with a comedy twist. I give you Ghostbusters Afterlife.
I remember Revelations. And I looked as he opened the sixth seal. There was a great earthquake. Judgment Day. Raise a call.
I'm calling about what happened in New York.
There hasn't been a ghost sighting in 30 years.
Oh my god. What is happening here?
Her grandfather was a Ghostbuster. Something was coming and he knew it.
I think we opened the gates of hell.
Hey, have you missed us?
Oh, yes. Yes. I tell you, that takes me back to my childhood right there. Man, 1984, Ghostbusters, Bill Murray coming off of Caddyshack and, Saturday Night Live and Stripes. But, man, before I get too far, down that path right there, that rabbit hole right here, Let's take care of a little MoviesMerica podcast business. What do you say here? Yes. So, as I always tell you here, because I know that you love to hear it, and it's my duty. Okay. I just want to let you know that it's this podcast, MoviesMerica podcast, is on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts. It's on iHeartRadio, Spotify. It's on MoviesMerica.com as well. It's basically just any kind of podcast source you can think of. It's on there. So just look up MoviesMerica, and particularly if you're on Apple Podcasts, please, Bertie, please. Man, I know. Wow, that sounded really pathetic. I should actually probably go and buy some Pride somewhere. But until then, please give it a 5-star rating and give it a review. Maybe it's a nice, short, very abbreviated review. Like, yo, I like your podcast. It's so awesome. See, you don't have to be that. It can be that. It can be that. It doesn't have to be, the Old Testament. It doesn't have to be the Gettysburg Address. It doesn't have to be a Stephen King novel. Just a little review, okay? And then, go and subscribe as well to this podcast on any podcast source of your choice. And again, like I said, it's on MoviesMerica.com. There's some podcasts on MoviesMerica.com that aren't on the podcast sources. Also, I'm on Twitter and Instagram. Yeah, Twitter and Instagram under MoviesMerica. And that is there just because, I like to put stuff up there, that might that I feel might tantalize you and entertain you And so if you want to tantalize me and entertain me back, feel free to DM me on there, and you can let me know what do you think about the podcast, any suggestions, consider it your suggestion box. Okay? Cuz I could always use some tips, so I mean, I'm not above that, okay? And as you know, my friends, typically on each podcast, I wet my whistle with a beer of the evening. And the beer this evening will be Revolver Texas Haze. That's right, Texas Haze. Now, the reason they call it Texas Haze, man, I love saying haze like that, haze, is because it's brewed in Texas. Okay, they brew it like in Granbury, Texas, and Arlington, Texas, and it is some tasty, tasty brew, I tell you. It's hoppy, it's light, it's even got a little slight hint of berry, So, and it's keeping me refreshed. Okay, so it is. It's doing the job. It's doing the job. It's doing its business and keeping me hydrated during this hard work that we call putting a podcast together. Ooh, very, very hard. Okay, all right. Let's get into it. Ghostbusters Afterlife. Man, this movie is. If I said I was anticipating this movie, man, what an unfair. What an unfair use of the word anticipate. It's anticipate. It's not even. It doesn't even cover it. I was just fanatical about the coming of this Ghostbusters movie here, and it lived up to the hype. It lived up to the hype. I mean, it had everything. It had the visual effects that you expect. The visual effects back in the original Ghostbusters were just eye-popping, right? In 1984, they had Richard Edlund. He had done the Industrial Light and Magic thing for Star Wars and ILM and all that, and he went off to do his own visual effects company. I call it Boss was the name of the company there, and he was just remember the original Ghostbusters? He just had Gozer and the Gatekeeper and Keymaster dogs and the cloud effects and all the lightning and the Stay-Puft Marshmallow Man, just incredible effects. And obviously, given that it is 2021, the visual effects have gotten better over the years, of course. And you see that in Ghostbusters Afterlife. It is incredible. And they do, have touches from the original there too. This is just a love letter to the original because it's a different composer, but they do pay tribute. It's kind of an ode to the original Elmer Bernstein soundtrack for Ghostbusters, for the Ghostbusters soundtrack there. So you'll hear new stuff in there, and there's some really cool, nice new touches to the soundtrack, but also you'll hear the familiar themes, the familiar friendly, themes that you miss from Elmer Bernstein's score from the original Ghostbusters, and it's just fantastic. It just takes it back. It's just one big trip down memory lane. It's very nostalgic, and so but while it's nostalgic, the new cast is fantastic as well, and I have to say, a couple of the standouts from this movie are a couple of the kid characters. Okay, we've got McKenna Grace as Phoebe, and then also we have Logan Kim as Podcast. His character's name is Podcast. Okay, but you see his character, he lives up to the name. So let's say homage to all podcasts everywhere. So probably not going to have a character called Podcast in the 1984 original. They would have no idea what the hell a podcast is back then. But those characters, Phoebe and Podcast, really stood out to me. They were great. Podcast kind of reminded me of the Jerry O'Connell character from Stand By Me, back in the day with River Phoenix and Will Wheaton, Corey Feldman. So really young Kiefer Sutherland there in Stand By Me. But yeah, they have great chemistry together. They're really good pals, and they really tear through the movie together, and they provide some great humor, some great fun in this movie. Paul Rudd also does a great job, so the recent People's Sexiest Man Alive is in this movie. And, he does a great job with, he basically, he's Paul Rudd, like they always say, like Ryan Reynolds is always in the movies, he's always Ryan Reynolds. Well, in this movie, Paul Rudd is Paul Rudd, right? So he's, he does, he's like a very affable, very, very friendly, very relatable, jovial, and adds a lot of comic flair to the movie. And he plays off of Carrie Coon as Phoebe's mom in this movie as well. So they've got some good kind of chemistry there together. And so yeah, it's just a great great cast here. We've got you've got the gentleman, I should say, Finn Wolfhard from Stranger Things and from the It movies. Here he's in the movie as Phoebe's brother. To be honest, he's kind of overshadowed by the Phoebe character, his sister, in this movie. But he does a good job in this movie. He plays his role, and he basically adds to the team that's taking on all the dark forces, all the spirits, all the spooks, all the ghosts, right? So, and yeah, it just takes off from when Carrie Coon playing Callie, Trevor and Phoebe's mom, they're evicted from their place. They've got no choice but to head out to Oklahoma, to this little out in the middle of nowhere town called Somerville in Oklahoma. And the reason they go out there is because her father, Phoebe and Trevor's grandfather, Igor Spangler, from the original Ghostbusters, Harold Ramis's character, left them like this old crappy farmhouse and barn out in the middle of nowhere. And so, they need a place to stay, right? And they need a place to live their life. And so they leave wherever they're from. They don't really specify, I don't think, in this movie. I don't know, it's New York or some bigger town. And they find themselves traveling out to Oklahoma, of all places. And the kids soon find the remnants of the Ghostbusters legacy, the ectomobile and some other things there. And they start seeing some ghostly happenings in the house. And it just leads them down this trail of adventure, and the story just snowballs from there. And Phoebe is definitely a pint-sized version of her grandpa in this movie, Igor Spengler, Harold Ramis's character, and they put that to good use. When you talk about the proton packs and the ectomobile and the technology, the ghost traps, you have to have a character in there that is scientific, right? And so she fits the bill. Very, very, very smart, very gifted child. And then also Paul Rudd, he plays a seismologist there, because this little town in Somerville, Oklahoma, they moved to is on no fault lines. It's not on any tectonic plates, but every day they have these earthquakes. They have these tremors, and so he's out in the town to figure out what's going on with these earthquake events, these seismic events here in this town. But he's pretty funny in the movie. There's so many Easter eggs in this movie. It's ridiculous, but they're not over the top. They're well placed. They're well earned, and you'll really appreciate them. A lot of movies that have Easter eggs in there are like, oh God, come on! It's just too much fan service. There's movies where they pay homage to former movies in the franchise, and it's fine. But then you got some that just take it too far with the fan service. Like the Star Wars movies, the Force Awakens and The Last Jedi. Just those movies just paid way too much fan service to the original Star Wars trilogy and the prequels. But Ghostbusters, the Easter eggs in this, are most welcome. One in particular here is when she finds the original the Ghostbusters jumpsuits, and in her grandpa's jumpsuit Spangler, she finds a Nestle Crunch wrapper in the pocket there. So it's just kind of a callback to the original movie, and so that was great to see. But it's a fast-paced movie. That's one thing I notice is they don't waste any time. The beginning of it is a little slower. I mean, as you would imagine, a plot line that takes place with them going out to a sleepy town in the middle of nowhere, Oklahoma, where it's just this typical small town living. It's not like the original version taking place in New York City and all the hustle and bustle of the plot there. But it's worth it. It really serves the movie to build it up, to let you know the characters, establish the environment, establish the history. They do a good job with the exposition, with explaining the significance of this little town in Oklahoma, as far as what does this have to do with New York City? In the original, they were there Central Park West and the big high rise apartment where Sigourney Weaver's Dana Barrett lived, and they were headquartered in a firehouse smack dab in the middle of Manhattan, and what is this little sleepy town in Oklahoma? How does it related to New York City? And it is fascinating and intriguing what you find out and how it plays into that. But it's it's got a really good emotional core to the movie. It brings back Dan Akroyd, Bill Murray, and the great Ernie Hudson in it. So that's I'm sure you've probably heard that by now. And they knock it out of the park. The magic is still there between them. The chemistry is still there, and they are just play their heroic part. But before they show up, Phoebe and Podcast and Trevor, they band together, and they're kind of like Ghostbusters Junior, right? They're the young Ghostbusters, and they really take it to the ghosts.
Can you stop breathing in my ear?
No.
Guys, this is kind of stupid. Are you sure you didn't just see, a raccoon or, a possum?
There!
Is that a...
Free-floating metal muncher. Definitely class 5.
Okay, what do we do?
Let's get him.
What?
Let me get a photo first.
Oh, it has a gunner seat?
That's what I'm talking about right there. It's fascinating reading up and watching the history of the Ghostbusters sequels, getting the sequels to Ghostbusters made. Now, one of the prominent things you'll hear if you kind of look into the history of Ghostbusters and getting these sequels made is that Bill Murray is notoriously tough to lock in to a Ghostbusters sequel. I mean, after the first Ghostbusters, he was really overwhelmed by just the publicity, just the sudden superstardom that he and Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis and Ernie Hudson were all propelled into. It was pretty daunting, and because he had been in Caddyshack and Stripes, other movies like that. He had been a hit on Saturday Night Live, but Ghostbusters just went through the stratosphere. That was just the movie, or one of the movies of 1984. You had Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom and other movies that year, but Ghostbusters was just a phenomenon. I remember it was just merchandise, and TV series, and just it's one of those movies like Titanic or Avatar or other movies, where people just, you gotta go see it, and people are lining up in line, over and over again to see Ghostbusters. It was just huge. And, it was like, they were all over magazines, and I can't imagine like what it would have been if, back then in 1984 you had Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and TikTok and all that. But it just overwhelmed Bill Murray, and, he's not that kind of guy. And, so it took a lot to get him to do, to a Ghostbusters sequel. I mean, he took like a 4-year sabbatical from acting after Ghostbusters, because right before he did Ghostbusters, he did this lousy movie called The Razor's Edge, and the only way that he agreed to do Ghostbusters, the first Ghostbusters, is they had to agree to not only let him make the Razor's Edge movie. He's basically told him, okay, we need to make the Razor's Edge. We need to film this thing and release it before I do Ghostbusters. And then that movie tanked. But then he agreed to do Ghostbusters after Dan Akroyd showed him the script, and he thought it was just hilarious, and decided to do it there. But yeah, just the success just overwhelmed him, and then finally he agreed to do Ghostbusters 2. Now, unfortunately, Ghostbusters 2 wasn't that great, just because they didn't give him very much time to make the movie, so it was rushed. And when you watch the movie, it is totally rushed, and it's just not funny at all. It's not even close. Doesn't even come even to the same stratosphere of the original Ghostbusters. But this one, Ghostbusters Afterlife, definitely does. And it's great to see like Bill Murray and Ernie Hudson and Dan Akroyd like on the late night talk shows and doing interviews. I just saw him on Jimmy Kimmel, and he was on there with Seth Meyers, and Bill Murray just looks like, along with Dan Akroyd and Ernie Hudson, he just looks like they're having a great time. He's nostalgic and loving it, and he's not the old cranky, Bill Murray from the 80s. I don't want to do another Ghostbusters movie. I'd rather do Scrooged, they're just, I think in his older age, in his, Twilight years here, he's kind of looking back and going, man, those were sweet years, looking back fondly. So yeah, it's great to see that. But they, like I said, they add, to this movie, Dan Akroyd, he gets pretty much a little bit more, screen time than Bill Murray and Ernie Hudson in this, but they play a pivotal part in this movie. But you can tell, at the end, they're leaving the door open, for, some interesting things to be done with the sequel to this movie. But this movie, it really helps. It makes the characters, the new characters, the kids, the Paul Rudd character, the Carrie Coon character, they do a great job, and you learn to like those characters. They're not just these stock characters. These are characters that I think you'll like, just like you liked, the Peter Venkman, the Ray Stantz, and the Igor character, from the original, one, and Ernie Hudson's character, with, that, just like, those are characters that you liked and you could associate with, and you related to them, and you cared what happened to them. The same thing with these characters. But like I was touching on earlier, the pacing is fast, and I like that. They're just like, hey, let's just get right to it, and they definitely do. The action's great. Like I said, the score matches the action, really nicely, and the humor is there. Like I was saying with Ghostbusters 2, absolutely humor-free. This one, just like the original Ghostbusters, is, it's got plenty of humor here. I should mention Annie Potts. She makes a appearance in this movie as well. Sigourney Weaver. You do have to wait to the post credits to see Sigourney Weaver, but she has a fun scene in the post credits scene as well, and it's good to see her there. I was frankly surprised that her and Bill Murray are the two that I was surprised that they were able to get back for this movie, but I'm definitely glad they did get them, and they do the top billing, and the ending, the final scene, it is very emotional. You will, depending on, it's especially for, people who grew up with the original Ghostbusters. It's definitely, it hits you. It hits you, and it's just a tribute. I will just put it that way. It's a very touching tribute, and it just makes it's the cherry on the top of the sundae to this movie. I just saw the movie. I've seen the movie once. I'm gonna go see it on IMAX. I would recommend seeing this on the biggest screen possible there, provided you're listening to this podcast while it's still in theaters. If you're if you're listening to this in like 2025, don't bother. It's not on IMAX, okay? So, but for right now, if you're listening to it, this podcast I recorded it like right after it was released. If you're listening to it now, go check it out on IMAX if you have IMAX, available. If not, get the biggest screen available to watch this. It's just fantastic. It's a feel good movie. It's gonna really cheer you up, and I can't recommend it enough. Okay. But with that, hey, you know what? Thanks for listening. And again, MoviesMerica Podcast is on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iHeartRadio, Spotify, on MoviesMerica.com. And you know what? I am going to down the rest of this Revolver Texas Haze. Okay? All right, but as always, like I said, thanks for listening. Who you going to call?
Hey, guys, don't leave the video quite yet. Okay, I've got a popo. They're coming after me, and I don't have much time to tell you, but you need to like and subscribe this video right here, down below. It's right down there. It's just waiting. It's waiting for you down there, okay? And make sure you watch these videos over here too. You'll be doing me a big favor. I'm gonna be in handcuffs pretty soon. All right, thanks for watching.